Exactly. So for the weather modeling software, this is what's very famous in the HPC world, and even the top system and NCSA Blue Waters. This is one of the applications they are running. So it's really, everybody's using it, but it's an utter mess. So the dependency graph is, well, complex is not the right word, but it has a fair amount of dependencies that are nasty to deal with by themselves, like the NetCDF stuff. They split up NetCDF in Fortran and C++, and so instead of just having one package, you now have 4 or 5. WRF comes with a configure script. That's not an auto-tune script, it's an interactive script. So when you run it, it starts asking you questions. It just spits out a list from 1 to 10. Intel compilers with Intel API, GCC with Intel API, GCC with Intel API 4, 5, and so on. So it goes like this, you have to pick numbers, tell it where to install, all that kind of stuff. So it's intended to be run manually. And the nice thing is, if you're done with running the configure script, you get a configure.wrf configuration file. And they really admit, okay, then you have to dive in and change some more stuff because the configure script doesn't handle this. So even though you've done an interactive thing, you still have to edit the file to get everything right. And then they have this compile script, which is basically just calling make, but in some fancy way. I'm not sure what you're doing there. So you have to call compile instead of make, otherwise it doesn't work. And they have no actual installation steps, so they just build it quick. They don't have a make install. So it would just, all the mess stays there. So that's not fun to deal with. It doesn't sound too bad here, but when you try to install it, it's a nightmare. I don't know, George probably tried it. Did you ever try it manually?
I did it here. Yeah, I never tried it manually. Okay. Thankfully. Because I thought, people, especially young explorers, those that you have tried once, you guys had it a few 2 years back.
For the performance analysis stuff.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Other than that, people will just fail. We have it planning here.
Actually, what happens in practice is when you want to set up that with the WRF here, you basically need to know who is the guy that is most experienced in doing this. Here is Mohammed. You have to go to Mohammed and ask him, please, can you set this up in this way? That's how it works in most cases, right?
Sure. Well, the same thing. A big success story here is that we've never had to deal with this. We have, 10 different versions of WRF installed on different systems. Here we have their own tank on Cythera, on Red Hat 6, on Euclid, and we've never. EasyBuild, yes, it's all EasyBuild. I'm with EasyBuild since 0.8. So.
Okay, so this is very non-standard. You forget about configure and make. It's using make, not directly. So how you do this with EasyBuild is you write an easy block, because each of the important steps, the configure and the build, is non-standard. So what EasyBuild does, it runs the configure script but autonomously. So in the easy block, it's passed a Python dictionary that knows how to answer each of the questions it gets. Then it patches the configure file, the configure.wrf file by itself. It has all the details, it knows which variables to fill into the configure script, so it just does it, and there's no manual intervention there either. Then once that is done, it builds with the compile script, and it tests the build as well, which is not part of the standard build procedure, but it pulls in a test case from the web somewhere. This is quite small, but the WPS is a big one. So it pulls in a test case, and it knows how to run it, so it runs it and it checks the exit code, and if everything looks okay there, then it assumes it's okay. So that's the easy block. Then the easy config files, we have easy config files for different versions of WRF, different toolchains of WRF, so with Intel compilers, with GCC compilers, and different build options. So you can build WRF in a distributed version with MPI, a shared memory version, so only OpenMP or hybrid. And for each of these, you can specify to EasyBuild. Please do this. Once that is taken care of, and it is now in EasyBuild, it just becomes a single command line to do it. Like, this is the way of not giving it a .db file. You just use -- software, I want to build WRF 3.4, and I want to use the ICTCE toolchain, which is the Intel compilers and API. And then use dash robots, so it takes care of open dependencies as well. So instead of fiddling about and spending quite a bit of hours on this, you just do it like this. So if you take a closer look at the EasyBlock, so the Python module you have to reduce. So the stuff I'm showing here is a very condensed version of the actual WRF EasyBlock, but it works. If you copy paste this, it will work. So the first thing you have to do is you have to do all the necessary imports. So it uses stuff from the framework, from the tools package. It also uses this. Do I have a mouse here? No. So there's the first from import. Basically, it imports a function from netcdf EasyBlock to set environment variables for netcdf. WRF is not the only package that requires this, so instead of implementing it hard here, we just create a function for it, and then you can call that function. There's other packages that rely on the same environment variables as well. And then we start defining the actual EasyBlock. So the WRF EasyBlock derives from the abstract EasyBlock class, because there's nothing standard in it, so it can't reuse something from other efforts. It specifies in a little bit, maybe tricky way, that it has to be built in the installation there, so there's no separate install there. So what we do right now for WRF is we just skip the creation of a build directory, we go directly to the installation directory, copy everything there, and do the build there. That does mean we leave a huge mess, we leave it there. For now that's okay. What you can also do is just do the build step separately in the build directory, and then try and copy everything you need to the install directory yourself.
Or you copy over and in the cleanup step to remove the stuff in.
Or you could do that as well. For now we don't bother because it's not really getting in the way. Okay, so that's the initialization of the EasyBlock basically. And then the extra options at the bottom is just saying for WRF specifically we have an extra variable you can set in the easyconfig file, which is the build type. And this basically says, is it a distributed build, shared memory build, what kind of build is it? And this is a mandatory option, so you have to specify which of these it is. EasyBuild won't pick for you. You have to really tell it what to do. You can have optional easyconfig parameters as well, depends on what you do. And this just adds to the list of stuff that's already done. And the next step is the first part of the configuration. So instead of running a simple configure script, there's actually a whole bunch of stuff going on here. So we set the environment variables for netcdf that just point to where the netcdf include directory is, where the lib directory is, maybe other stuff as well. It does it in a way that even if netcdf and netcdf Fortran are two separate packages, the environment variables are set for all of them. So WRF or the installation procedure doesn't have to know EasyBuild hides this.
Who wrote this set netcdf in force?
It's written in the netcdf EasyBlock, so I wrote it. It's just in a separate Python. It's available in the whole EasyBuild framework. Or is this something you?
No, yeah.
You can see.
I wonder basically. I mean.
It's just
how generic that would be. So is it basically getting all the stuff you probably need for every package who wants to use, let's say, basically?
It sets a bunch of environment variables that are known to be used across software packages.
Yeah. And it might be always too much, but you don't care.
Yes, it might set too much, or if it doesn't set enough, then you might have to extend it, or just add on here. But it depends.
This basically is the workaround that the module package was actually built for commands, yes. Not for libraries. And so is how to basically, and there's different sites are using different things. Yeah? So I saw sites basically for libraries, you typically know the headers and the libs. Yeah? And they typically set two environment variables. One is the ink dir and the other is the lib dir. Sometimes we realize that it's more than one, so they give you the include config files and the lib files, and then you make files. But because every system does it differently, even if there's modules, it's not helpful. At the end of the day, module loads netcdf, and on every system have my makefile using it.
Yeah.
But with EasyBuild, basically, you get around it, basically, that you define all these, what it's, from one is to the other group is.
It's defined as runtime,
basically.
yeah, it's not in the module file. You could actually also add it to the module file that's generated for netcdf. It doesn't matter. As long as what's EasyBuild wants to set and what's there is.
So this basically means another option. These module files basically. So the guy who makes the EasyBuild thing, he has to say what's in the module file. Basically, what environment variables, libraries have to be set, and so on.
Stuff is standard there, like include path, load library path, cpath. If a path is found that matches that environment variable, it is set automatically. And in the easy block or in the easy config file, you can specify what also has to be added to the module. So it's optional. So some stuff is always there, some stuff is optional depending on.
But basically, it's specified by the guy who prepares the specification.
So EasyBuild not only sets, in this case, the netcdf environment variables, but also stuff like $cc or $cxx. So for compilers, for API, for make sure load library is set for all the math libraries you're using, and so on. So it prepares the whole environment for building. Okay, so netcdf is set, and then for Jasper it is set as well. And that seems to be specific to WRF, so it's hard coded here. So you just ask EasyBuild where is the installation path of Jasper, and then based on that it will set the include and the lib environment.
And you could basically encode this optional stuff. So if Jasper's not there, it gets ignored or something.
Yes.
Or you could program that in, it doesn't work.
Well, that's actually what it does. If you do get software root and it's not loaded, it will just return none. And then the if block is not executed.
So this is how I could make my optional.
That's if you do an easy block, if you do an easy block.
Yeah, when I want to do it basically reproduce this behavior, I would have to write a Scalaska easy block.
Yes.
Because they know if copy then do this or
if copy then do it with copy. So, okay. Then so for the dependencies, the environment variables are set. Then you need to set this fancy magic environment variable to enable large file support to WRF, whatever that may mean. If you want to do decent runs of WRF, you actually need this. And apparently, if you don't set it, the build is done slightly differently and stuff doesn't work, so you have to make sure it's set. Then the next thing we have to do, this is a little bit tricky to explain. So the configure script is an interactive script. And the configure script itself is a bash script, but it calls build scripts that are part of the WRF source. One of these build scripts is config new.pl. And in Perl, if you're running a Perl script in an automated way, the way it flushes to standard out is, let's say, not correct. So if you view at the output, you might only see part of the output because it's not flushed. So what we do here, we make sure it always flushes everything to standard out, and that way EasyBuild can see the questions it has to answer and make sure it gets the answer correct. Otherwise, it will just get only half of the question and won't be able to recognize it, and then everything breaks. This was really fun to figure out. Right? It took me quite a couple of hours, and the price is really simple. And then we figure out, so we have a list of build types we know about, and we check which one is specified and whether it makes sense. We also know which ones are parallel. We need to know that for a particular reason. I don't know why. Now, so if something else than serial, SM part, DM part, or DM plus SM is specified, then something is wrong. And the user doesn't know what he's doing or he needs to. That's the first part, that's preparing to configure. And then to run the configuration script, which is done here on line 51, so run the command QA, we need to construct the dictionary that we pass to the run command QA function that knows about questions and answers. Here it's tricky because what WRF does, it gives you a list of options to choose from, like 1 to 5, and each option matches a specific compiler and API combination, something like that. The fun thing is, across WRF versions, they change the numbers. So they reorder stuff for God knows what reason. they add one option instead of adding it at the bottom, which would make sense if you add it somewhere in the middle and everything shifts. So the numbers are not the same. So what we do here, we figure out the number from the question. We just match the last part of the question. We figure out what the number was, and then we use this number as an answer. And that actually works. So it's a bit involved, but it's quite powerful. So then we run the configure script up to completion. EasyBuild will check the exit code, make sure everything looks okay, but there's no guarantee there. And once the configure script is run, it will edit the configure.wrf configuration file to get all the details right. Like here, if you want to set the C compiler, you have to set SCC or serial C compiler. The distributed C compiler is then DMCC, and you need to make sure you add the MPI2 support, preprocessor option, and so on. So it just fills in all these details in the configure.wrf file, and whatever was there, it just overrides them. It just says, I know better than you, and this is going to work. I think the actual version is more extended, so it patches a lot more than what is patched here. So basically what we're saying here, we don't trust what the configure script does, but it does more than just generate this file, so we run it anyway.
But basically, to summarize this, basically, you take an expert who figures out how to build this, and then he codes the manual steps you would normally do in a code script.
The expert does it once, and people like George who just want to use WRF and hit and stuff.
And then you work around all these things like, oh, automatically this stuff doesn't work in this thing, and then just encode it with power.
Well, actually, what we've done in past like similar events, not necessarily hackathon, we invite the users with their, the software, and we ask them to come up with a bash script that builds the software and installs it. Basically, the bash script takes the name of the software and the variable. And then they're supposed to encode all their knowledge into that script, so if somebody knows EasyBuild well can simply
translate.
This is the way to break the barrier and through that.
Yeah, that's what this has said a while back, and it's been, and we've used it.
Yeah, the question here is that we split the knowledge that relates to the build process from the knowledge that relates to EasyBuild.
Yes,
so that people that don't have the second one can still provide the instructions in the reproducible way. And then the rest is just about getting together and donating.
We actually did this with a person from what's his name? From the University of Illinois, this bioinformatics group. They had tens of packages in bioinformatics, and we wanted to include those in our build process because we wanted to make those available. So we asked. He came over. He brought something like 20 scripts with him that built the software. And it was helpful for him to actually come up with the scripts, but then really easy for us to see, oh, that's how you do it. I mean,
if someone has really good documentation, you just basically look at the documentation, it says do this and
yes, but nothing beats
I know.
Yes.
Because documentation can be wrong.
Yes.
So, to relate it to that, one thing that's, I don't know if it's a real issue, but one thing we would like to have is have experts review this stuff. So we want to go to the WRF people, to NCAR, and say, this is how you do a WRF installation, is it correct?
If you need a WRF people to apply for it.
Yes, so that's an issue. So what we want to make EasyBuild do is, from the easy block, spit out the bash script that just says, these steps are followed, basically the commands that are run, the patches that are done to the files, does this look correct? And for that should be more doable, right? It's like how
I do know is a bash expert, but I'm not sure.
So yeah, if you give this to someone who doesn't know Python, they're never going to figure it out. Or they would have to put in too much effort.
So the guys will have to spit out the CSAs.
Yeah, but really, to be honest, I mean, you're not doing it enough justice here because I was never a Python developer. On the first day that I started, when I realized, look, I need a block, it took me less than a day to come up with an easy block because there are so many examples there to follow. Exactly, but there's I don't know, something like more than 30 you mentioned earlier, or 130.
No,
Examples of
What I
this.
tell you, a good programmer can easily program in any language because he knows what, And he just said, okay, by examples or something, this is how we specify a loop, if and else, a loop or something, it just picks up on examples. And bad programmers like never do this, and then they write that code in, can write that Python code, that shell code.
And this is like the worst case scenario of things.
This is,
right?
this is
I know.
this is very involved.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the configure part, so then we're done with configuration. Then the build is a lot more simple, but instead of calling make, we call the compile script -J to build a parallel. And then the fun thing here is if you want to build WRF, and I've been told this is the only way. So if you run the compile script, it will generate a WRF command. But to really use WRF, we actually need two utilities as well, which is ideal.exe and real.exe. The only way to build them is to build a test case. There's no separate make target for that. So we just compile two test cases here, and then we know ideal and real are generated. And I've been told by people who are familiar with WRF, yeah, this is just how we do it, and to them it makes sense. To me it doesn't. Instead of having make or compile all or make all, this is how we do it. And then the install step is empty because we're building in the install directory. This is then the easy config file, so you just specify you want to build WRF with a particular version. Right now, the stuff like homepage and description is still mandatory in the easy config file. It's not really clear if we're going to continue to do that because you have an easy block already. So, and usually this stuff doesn't change.
Like, one question, coming back to the problem before with these different versions.
Yeah.
I don't know how much work it would be, but what I would basically say is, I say name something, and then say we use, and I specify another EB file, and then I add additional stuff or override stuff which are different.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, if I do the same thing with different build type, I just say blah blah blah, reuse something, and then I make a build type.
Yeah.
And
the thing we're planning is very close to that, and we can discuss that afterwards. So maybe you can give some feedback there. It's very close to that.
But in the current situation, you would simply pass into your config, right?
Yes.
You will simply declare this variable or something like that in your config, and then you would pass down here. But then you would simply extend this to use the whatever.
there's probably different versions of it.
Yeah, there's different ways to tackle it. You can also do it on the command line. You can override stuff on the command line.
Yeah.
I see.
It's we give you a lot of options because different people like different things. So the toolchain is specified as well with toolchain options. So right here for this is a little bit. So you have to check the documentation for this, but the toolchain option opt is enabled by default, and by default does -02. But apparently, if you build WRF with -02, it breaks. So the binary that is generated is not correct. It spits out wrong results. So you have to disable that to make it build with 01 instead of 02. So that's what opt false is basically doing. We have to specify what the source file name is. So here the name and the version are encoded in the source file. We actually now have better ways to do this. A list of patch files, and for WRF it's quite extensive because if they figure out a bug in WRF, instead of releasing a new version, they post on the web page somewhere, please go to file tralala.f and adjust line 30 this variable. They don't even give you a patch file, they give you manual steps to do it. Okay. That's not what we're into. And then there's other stuff as well. The parallel build is broken because they get some make file dependencies wrong, so it doesn't always work. So we fixed that. For the test that we run, you have to limit the runtimes because sometimes they get stuck in an infinite loop, and then the loop takes really long. That's also not good. And for the NetCDF4 trying to split off, WRF doesn't know about that yet. At least this version doesn't. So you have to tell it to look in into multiple directories for the nets to be applied. We specify the dependencies and we make sure that the build type is specified. If it wouldn't be, then EasyBuild would complain something is mandatory, it's not there, so you have to specify. And depending on how complex your software is, and some of this stuff could move to the EasyBuild as well, like the homepage and description, that usually doesn't change, so why not put it there? Just up until now, we've not done it. And everything, so for some of these versions, some of these parameters have default values, like patches is just by default an empty list. So everything you specify here always overrides whatever is